Welcome to the Sports Innovation Institute podcast, located inside the School of Health and Human Sciences at IUPUI in Indianapolis, Indiana. I'm your host, Travis Smith, a proud sport management alum, adjunct faculty member, and associate editor of the Sports Innovation Journal here at IUPUI. On this podcast, we look to highlight the innovative practitioners and scholars in sports to learn and design think the future of the industry together. Thanks for listening to the Sports Innovation Institute podcast. All right, welcome to the IUPUI Sports Innovation Institute podcast. I'm joined by Dr. David Pierce, the director of the Sports Innovation Institute, to talk about a new research that the Sports Innovation Institute partnered with Grand Park. And we want to talk about that today, called Preparing Sports Venues and Events for the Return of Youth Sports. So, Dr. Pierce, thanks for being with me.
Thanks, Travis.
So we'll just jump into the questions, and everyone can download the research the same way as always with our authors. So what is the backstory on how this partnership research project evolved with Grand Park and the Sports Innovation Institute?
Sure. We've had a great relationship with Grand Park over the last 4 or 5 years. They're the largest youth sports facility in the country, over 400 acres up in Westfield, Indiana. That's about 25 minutes north of our downtown Indianapolis location. Their director, William Knox, and I have worked on several projects. We've had students doing some visitor experience research and presenting innovative concepts up there. We sent a ton of interns and practicum students up there. It's just been a really rich relationship. And as I started to think and look at kind of the landscape ahead here in May and June as we return into youth sports, it just seemed like the right opportunity to really try to help facilities and events prepare for that return. That was really our motive behind it, was helping events and facilities prepare for the return of youth sports by understanding what parents think about kind of these 12 key adaptations that we'll talk about here today. And William was completely on board, and he's a leader in the space, and he really helped us amplify the message that we had the survey and got it out into the hands of a broad cross section of youth sports. And we actually ended up with over 10,000 results in the study.
Yeah, you did the survey that was distributed to 40 different organizations that could survey their members. And so, as you mentioned, over 10,000 people completed the entire survey from 45 states, representing at least 13 different sports. That's nearly 92% of respondents were also parents, and they also had other roles that they could choose as well. So can you talk about what types of questions were asked and then what survey model you use as your method?
Sure. Yeah. So we ended up using the Kano model to try to understand satisfaction and dissatisfaction with the presence and absence of these adaptations. And so when we say adaptations, we're talking about things like, limiting the amenities on site. So it's like closing the concession stands, for example, limiting personal contact between athletes off the field. So we kind of call that the 3 H's, the handshakes, the high fives, the hugs, potentially playing without spectators, changing your arrival and departure routine, increased sanitization practices, face masks, social distancing, completing some sort of a health screening to gain admission to the venue. And then we also kind of looked at maybe what we might call the no grandparents rule, right? So limiting admissions to those people under 65 with no pre-existing medical conditions. And so we looked at this using the Kano model, which is historically, really it's a very pragmatic user design tool. And really, if you think about what event and facility operators are creating right now, is they're creating a new user experience in youth sports. So during a pandemic, right? So kind of given that context of being a user design tool, the model really helps venues understand how people feel about the adaptations by accounting for the presence and the absence of those adaptations. So it kind of gives you a two-dimensional look at satisfaction. And it really, the real value of it is and you'll see in the infographic as you look at that here tied to the podcast, is it gives you a really good interpretive framework for placing those adaptations and understanding what they mean.
Yeah, I like that there were, it makes it really simple. It's options were attractive, delights, performance, more the better, indifferent, don't care, and must be, gotta have it options. So it made it really clear and easy to understand and see a picture by using that model. So, what were some of the responses you received, and what did that tell you for interpreting the results into actual action steps?
Yeah, so I think a good example to kind of easily understand how the model and the quadrants work is the very top right part of the graph is the performance quadrant, which we call the more the better, right? So these are things that people experience more satisfaction with the experience, the more of it that they receive, right? So an example from everyday life might be, the storage space on your phone or in your Dropbox account, right? The more storage space, the more gigabytes you have, the more satisfied you're going to be with it. Well, here that translated into the sanitization practices of kind of common and high touch areas, and then also of playing areas and equipment, right? So the more sanitization that occurs, the more satisfied users are going to be. The bottom right quadrant then is the must be quadrant. And so these are things that are the fundamental or critical elements, the adaptations that have to be there for people to really feel comfortable engaging in youth sports again in a safe way. So an example here with social distance arrangements, fit into this quadrant. So these are things then that they're the presence of the adaptation. So doing social distancing doesn't really necessarily satisfy people. People are not experiencing a lot of satisfaction, but if it's absent, then people are going to be significantly dissatisfied. So if we think of other experiences in sport, Wi-Fi connectivity at a professional or college sports venue would be something that people would classify as a must-be element of the experience, right? So when you hop on your phone to get connected, you don't feel an incredible amount of satisfaction when you get connected, but if you don't have it, you really notice it, and it makes it significantly dissatisfying. So the things then from our study that fit there are social distancing guidelines, um, limiting personal contact between athletes. That's the handshakes, the high fives, the hugs. I mentioned social distancing, limiting admissions to those under 65 with no conditions. So actually the no grandparent rule fit into the must be quadrant. And then the other thing that was a must be was completing a health screening to gain entry into the venue. And so in the travel sports world too, we also included in that listing of items that you would answer questions about would also be your lodging information and your contact information. So if someone were to get the coronavirus, then that would help with the contact tracing portion of that. And so those were kind of the four things that fit into that must be, gotta have it quadrant. And then the other quadrant that was important or that we had results in was the indifferent quadrant. So these are the things that people just frankly really don't care about. So I think of it just personally, our pool in our neighborhood just opened up last week, and the concession stands are closed all summer, right? So you know what it's like, I can deal with that, right? Like I'm just happy that the pool's open. I can, for a season here, I can deal with the concessions not being open. So it's kind of things that fit into that categorization. So limiting the amenities were there. So that again would be like a concession stands and maybe, the other kind of entertainment centers and things that facilities have built to entertain people in their downtime. Altering the bench and dugout areas to kind of limit the number of people that might be in a dugout or a bench space fit there. Changing your arrival and departure routines, right? So that's like, coming to the facility fully dressed because, you don't have a locker room to change in. It's not sticking around for that extra game to scout the next opponent or to watch your friend play. And then the other thing that fit there was actually wearing face masks. But wearing face masks actually landed there because it was an average of the people that were really passionate that we should be wearing them and those that are not. So just like any other aspect of current American life, there was strong opinions on that, and it just kind of landed there as an average. But the amenities, the dugouts, and the changing the arrival and departure routines, people just saw they were indifferent to it. It was not important, and they don't care. It's kind of like, you know what, we can just deal with this for now. And then the only thing that classified into the reverse quadrant, which would be these are the things that people don't want and were very resistant to, was playing without spectators, right? So limiting admission only to officials, administrators, and players, and playing without spectators. That was not well received by respondents, and that's where that is where they should tread lightly should such a policy be implemented.
Yeah, that one was interesting because it makes me think that 92% of the respondents were parents, and so they're okay with the no grandparent rule, but not necessarily the spectators. And one thing that I could see venue managers think about is there a space around the area where they could watch from their vehicles and not obstructed? But when you go to a large venue, sometimes all the fields are actually in a circle, and so you can't actually park close enough to the venue. So that's something that different youth sports organizations will have to think about. But it was not a surprise to see that in the reverse area, in my opinion, that spectators did not want to not be able to go, especially if they're driving a long ways.
Hey listeners, a quick message and then we'll get right back to the interview. I wanted to quickly tell you that the Sports Innovation Journal is now accepting submissions. If you have or are looking for a place to publish your innovative thoughts and studies on the sports industry, then please consider the Sports Innovation Journal. We are an open access journal, and our target audience is the practitioner looking for answers to the questions and problems in their job, and we want to attract and publish researchers that are identifying and studying those questions and problems. If you are interested in learning more about the journal and wanting to submit or sign up to be a reviewer, then visit the link in the episode notes or email Dr. David Pierce, the editor and director of the Sports Innovation Institute, at dpierce3@iupui.edu, dpierce3@iupui.edu. Now let's get back to the interview.
I think a lot of the respondents are involved in competitive travel sports. Figure 5 in the study shows comfortability returning to travel youth sports by each month. What did that graphic sort of tell you? What's the story? And does that give somewhat of a timeline for youth sport event managers to target a return and decide whether they can feasibly have their venues and operations ready in time, such as having the resources to carry out the gotta have it results?
Yeah, it does, and these results mirror people's general kind of travel comfort level returning to travel as well, that have been published in a variety of other places. So we asked them on the day that they took the survey, how comfortable are they returning to traveling? And these are the youth sport travel parents specifically, so over 8,000 of those in the respondent set. So on the day they took the survey in late May, that number was a little bit under 40%, but there is a steady climb to around 50% in June, and then it bumps up to 70% in July, and then all the way September and beyond, it actually nudges over 80%. So there is a gradual comfort level there that increases, and so by the time you're hitting July and August, things are returning to more normal levels.
Yeah, I think if anyone pays attention to the 12 adaptations, they're going to notice a theme that the survey respondents are actually responding quite wonderfully to the CDC guidelines, and with the hand sanitation, the 60 social distancing, the 65 and under population being allowed in there. So just a lot of things correlating with what we're seeing as the public guidelines. And the one, and really even the mask thing isn't surprising that it's not a must be, because they're going to be playing outdoors most likely. And so there's talk that it could be a little safer. But with such a large survey, it really is interesting to see how people are paying attention to these guidelines and how it really can help get sports back.
Yeah, I think that's a really good observation. And the other kind of interesting the way that we divided up the data was looking at what we would call, just recreational youth sports. So kind of the local recreation parents versus the travel parents. And there's a really cool graphic in the paper, if folks are able to download it, that shows all of the dots, all of those adaptations on the graph move up and to the right when we look at the rec parents, which means the recreation parents see all of those adaptations as more fundamental, critical, or essential to the return for youth sports. So travel parents still are seeing them as important. They're in the different quadrants that we talked about, but it's even more pronounced and even stronger for those recreational parents, which is interesting because those kind of the reverse of the CDC recommendation currently, which is the sports that should, and other governing bodies as well, that the sports that should be returning first are actually the local and recreational ones, when in fact that's not in practice how things are actually happening. But it makes sense, right? The youth, the travel sports crowd, they're more invested, right? They've got more money invested, they've got more time invested, and so they're just a little bit. They want to more quickly get back on the field of play.
Yeah, and it might just be because they see this as an opportunity to actually play, and worried that maybe their state association or their school might not be able to get a full season in. So just a lot of different factors that I imagine. But I think this is an incredible study for people to pay attention to. It really can help lead to some good policy and event management. So Dr. Pierce, thanks for being with me. As always, listeners can download in the show notes the actual paper of the study, and also click the infographic. We'll make it as clear as possible and easy for practitioners to put this to practice.